Hi everyone, Donnie here, Innovation Fika, Wednesday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. And you're watching me, Donnie, here, live from KTH, usually from KTH, and sometimes out in the world. Last week I was actually in Kigali, in Rwanda, and I was hoping to do a live broadcast there, but I just had such a jam-packed schedule last week, so I just didn't make it. However, this week I have a super duper special for you. 3 years ago, actually almost to the date today, I interviewed well, she was already a famous author back then, and she's even more famous author now. Katrine, because she just released a new book. It was called Att uppfinna världen in Swedish, Mother of Invention in English. And we said back then that let's do a follow-up in a couple of years. And actually here is the follow-up in a couple of years, because here we go. It's me and Katrine Kielos-Marçal. And I'm so happy to welcome her back into the studio. And welcome back to the show. Hi, Katrine.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you. I can't believe it's been 3 years.
No. It's like just last year. But the interesting thing was, I was actually going back to what we were talking about then, and I was looking. I went through the book again, and when we met last time, it was the 4th of November, 2020, and we were just in the pandemic then.
We were, yeah.
We were in the pandemic then, and we did this thing online, and nobody really knew where the world was going. And then suddenly today, we're 3 years later, and the pandemic still, it feels like it's nobody really, I mean, we're back to more or less normal, it feels like, even though we do more remote stuff. However, so many thoughts came back to my head, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's start by welcoming you into the show and saying hello to everybody online. As usual, I will say to everyone online, add your comments in the chat. We will pick them up as we go along. Always happy to see people joining online. But let's start by just doing a short recap. And even though I know that most people probably know you, Katrine, but if I would ask you, who are you and what do you do? What would be the short answer to that?
I'm the global economic commentator at Dagens Nyheter, which is a paper in Sweden, and I'm an author, and I've written a couple of books on women and innovation, women and economics. My first book is called Who Cooked Adam Smith's Dinner. It was translated to more than 20 languages. And then Mother of Invention, that I think you were the first person to ever interview me about that book when it first came out in Sweden, actually. It's about women and innovation. The full English title is Mother of Invention, How Good Ideas Get Ignored in a World Built for Men. And that book came out in Sweden in 2020 and has since been published in several languages. It was nominated for Business Book of the Year in Germany last year. It was shortlisted for the Andrew Carnegie Medal of Excellence in Nonfiction in the US, and it's taken me out in the world to speak about women and innovation, and it has been very exciting. And obviously all of this has led me straight back to you, Donnie, and here I am.
Oh wow! Thank you. I'm thrilled, and I didn't actually know that I was the first person in Sweden to interview about the book, but I know that.
But I do think so. If it was sort of 4th of November 2020, it must have been. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but I know that a lot of people reached out to me afterwards and said, "Oh, what a wonderful interview! It's so fantastic to see her, and we need to speak to her." And I know that you also did things with my colleagues here, and it was fun. I mean, I'm so really pleased also to see how well it has been received, because when I read it the first time, well, when I heard about it the first time, I knew it was something I had to read, and when I read it, it was like, this one needs to be spread. I saw that you had the Japanese edition recently.
Yes, I think it's yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah.
What's it called in Japanese?
Yeah. We need to study, I think. Yeah.
I won't. Anyway, I actually had I have lots of questions, of course, but for anybody who might not, if there might be somebody watching this who hasn't read the book, Mother of Invention, Do you want to give it just a very short, a super short description of it? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's basically what it says on the box. You know, it's a book about how good ideas get ignored in a world built for men. So it's about all the ideas we miss and have missed because of our gender bias, something that we all have. And it starts with the story of the rolling suitcase, which is one of these classic mysteries of innovation that lots of people have written and thought about. You know, how come that we didn't invent the rolling suitcase until the 1970s? So we didn't come up with the thought to sort of put wheels on suitcases until after we put 2 men on the moon. And there's been lots of explanations as to why this is and how come and what does it say about our sort of limitations as innovators. But I basically figured out the true story through my research, and that's why the book starts there. And the reason why we didn't put wheels on suitcases until 1972 has to do with gender bias. There were products applying the technology of the wheel to the suitcase before that, but most of them were niche products for women. And there was this idea that no man would ever roll a suitcase, and that obviously suitcases was something that you sold to business travelers. There was another assumption that business travelers are all men and no man will ever roll a suitcase. So, hey, this idea will never take off. And then this changed in the 1970s with, there was the first commercially successful patent in the US by Bernard Sadov. I think it was 1972. And at first, no American department store wanted to sell this product, again, because they thought that, you know, women might buy it, but they were too small of a market. And men obviously wouldn't, because it was ridiculous. It was incompatible with any sort of idea of masculinity that a man would do something as ridiculous as roll a suitcase. But this innovator, he still believed in his idea, and he marketed to business women, who were a group that grew obviously in the 1970s and 1980s in the West in particular. And then it took off, and sort of by the 1990s, wheels on suitcases were everywhere. And we forgot about this very sort of gendered resistance to the idea. So that's how I start the book, with, you know, with just something that we all can relate to. And then it goes into more examples and sort of theories around how gender bias holds us back, and why that is, and what we can do about it.
I mean, I love there's so many good examples in the book as well. I love the spacesuit examples, like when guys were going to send other guys into space, they had to figure out who can actually put together a spacesuit which is versatile enough, and who can actually sew this. And then they go, and then who knows how to do that? And then they found the seamstresses that actually had the only ones with the skill to do that.
Yeah.
I love that example. There were so many examples.
Yeah, and I mean, that I think that's the spacesuit example is great, because it challenges what we think of as technology. So NASA had this very challenging problem, you know, how to make a spacesuit that would actually work. And the only company that ended up being able to create something, as you say, that passed the tests was a company specialized in female underwear making, because they had seamstresses who were skilled enough to create these suits that were then worn by Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong on the moon. And it sort of challenges our idea, you know, what is technology? We tend to think of technology as, you know, things made by men in hard materials with lots of sort of wires coming out, right? But obviously sewing is also technology. So that's an example. I talk about the electric car, which was
of course
very heavy. Yes, it was very heavily, I mean, you know, this is particularly if you read the book twice, which I'm very flattered by. No, I mean, electric cars were invented, as I think probably most people who are watching this live stream know, already in the late 1800s. But they pretty soon became very heavily marketed towards women, because there was this idea that a car that was cleaner and safer and slower, but much more reliable, was a vehicle for the ladies. And these sort of associations between femininity and the electric car led to actually the electric car not taking off in the way that one could have assumed otherwise, because male consumers in the end didn't want anything like this, and this wasn't the main reason why we ended up, building a whole world for petrol-driven cars instead. But it certainly contributed, I argue, in the book, and yeah, it's sad and funny.
Hey, Matthew, one of my very regular viewers, I can't believe how much gender bias is so ingrained. Well, it is. And I will encourage everyone to read the book, because it's a really good starting point to get reflection going. I will ask you one thing though. Now that it's been out for 3+ years, it's translated all of these languages, and different cultures as well have the book in their language. Have you a bunch of questions? But the first one is: have you experienced any other? Have people been saying, and here's another one, and we do this, and this is, have people, what are the news stories do you have to tell us that aren't in the book?
Yeah, I mean, I've been out speaking about these topics, a lot to businesses and to universities. I mean, KTH, obviously, well, I was very grateful to be invited. And I think what I've been met with is, I mean, surprisingly, a quite similar response. Mm-hmm. In the different countries. I mean, obviously I haven't been all over the world, but I've been in Europe, I've been to North America, I've been to Asia, and there's always almost the same sort of character that comes up to me after I speak, and it tends to be a young woman who is very, very frustrated because she has this idea and she can't get funding. And I've experienced this in so many countries now, in contexts and cultures that it is, and that has actually surprised me, because that is what I talk about as well in the book, is the funding gap. It's how difficult it is for women to get investments, and I know that's something that that you've highlighted a lot and worked with, and because it is very important. But I've been surprised by how almost universal that frustration is, and we can see that in the data. Obviously, as an economist or as a financial journalist, when you look into this topic, but to meet that woman in so many different contexts has for me been, I mean, quite frustrating and a bit depressing as well, because I can write a book with lots of examples that hopefully highlights gender bias and how important it is to challenge it, but I don't really have a solution to particularly how to close the funding gap.
But the book ends anyway on a kind of a positive note. I mean, it's a
I try, yeah.
But it's a forward-looking book. It doesn't end with that. It's everything. It ends on a kind of a forward-looking, progressive note, and I like that as well. But 3 years now into the game, do you feel that? I mean, again, we were standing in the pandemic then, and the world has changed back to pre-pandemic kind of. Do you feel that it's been? I was going to say, do you feel that the world's going in the right direction? I don't go, oh my God, I read the paper every day. No, it's not.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as they say, the best way to predict the future is to create it, which is what what innovation is about. So I actually don't like. You shouldn't be a financial journalist if you don't like making predictions, I guess. But to sort of say the world is going in this direction or it's going in that direction, and just to read trends, I think we're creating the world, and we can make it into what we want or a better place. So I don't like making those predictions. I do think there are several developments. I mean, one big one, I do talk about artificial intelligence in the book and the gender perspective on artificial intelligence and the third industrial revolution. And that's obviously, since you and I last spoke in this format, at least, has taken off with generative AI and a whole new sort of discussion where I actually feel that the gender perspective that I point to in the book is sadly quite lacking. So that's not very good, I'd say, because I do think we need to talk about the effects that this technology will have and is having on the labor market in terms of gender. And I think also that historical perspective that I try to give is needed. We tend to think of everything as new, it's new, and it's a complete game changer. we've been through this type of, maybe not exactly this type of structural change, but we've been through it before. And there's also this sort of fear of a lot of robots or of artificial intelligence, which I talk about in the book as something almost unnecessary. I think we are very much in that. So there, I wish these types of perspectives would have been applied more. I think in other times, I mean, if we talk about the funding gap with money to investment in female-led businesses is going down in Sweden at least, and that's depressing. And it's also I guess it's blamed on the general economic outlook, and that's also depressing, because then basically what we're saying that in good times we can sort of afford to invest in women's ideas because we kind of don't really believe in them, but in bad times when we have to cut, then let's go back to the basic, which is sort of a white man, and that's
I mean that. But I'm sort of interrupting you there, but that's terrible, because what you're saying then is that in good times we can afford to spend 1% on female innovations,
and now it's down to 0.5,
which is terrible. But I'll just to not contradict, but to try and balance that, I will say that before and during, when you came to us as well, when you spoke to me and my colleagues and we talked about it, it actually influenced us a lot when it came to the way we looked at innovation and how we see who is an innovator. So I'm not saying that we are in any way perfect, because we aren't, and we're always working on it. But I will say that we've spent a lot of time working on our own mindset of who we perceive as an innovator, and trying to lower and the important part is, I think for us, has been to lower the thresholds into us, so people feel welcome and feel that they need to see other people that are like them, so they feel that, oh, I belong here as well. And we're trying. We're not in any way perfect, but we're trying to create an environment where all people feel welcome to come to us with their ideas. And that has actually increased the number of, if we just do the gender equality thing, it has increased the number of ideas brought to us by female innovators a lot. So I mean, we're hitting maybe 40% now.
And that's amazing. And I remember you telling me, and because I thought it was amazing. It was how you worked with the language around innovation. I'm not supposed to ask the questions in this live, but I do want to ask them, because I don't quite remember, because there was some really, and I think that is actually valuable for anyone who experiences this problem of wanting women to come and join an incubator or something like that, and then having very few women applying, because you, if I remember it correctly, had some success with actually just changing the language around.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, it was a fundamental change of mindset when we realized that we'd just fallen into the rut of this startup-y entrepreneurship, aggressive communication of, win.
You have an idea,
kill something smaller than yourself and win the game, that kind of thing, right? Yeah. And we realized that, that's a very, I'm doing the whole very generic thing now, but the generalizing thing, but it was a very sort of blue masculine way of expressing yourself. So what we then did was we looked through all of the way we communicate, which images do we show, who do we show on stage, everything, and we decided to do a complete rewrite. And instead of this win, kill, own thing, we went into much more of a more general support, help, coach, any idea is worthy to listen to, and that whole rhetorics was changed. And as I've said before on this show as well to other people, is that not only did we get more females coming to us with ideas, we got more people coming to us with ideas, because it became a more humane, inclusive environment. And again, it came down to never underestimate the power of the symbolic sort of an identification. People need to feel comfortable with that I belong somewhere. So yes, we were really hard to work with there a couple of years, because if we were invited up on stage, we'd say, "I will need to see the speaker rooster," and if I was up invited somewhere, I said, "It's only guys, I'm not going." So I said no, and it was and then people of course accuse us for cutting off our nose to spite ourselves, because why would you turn something like that down? And I was like, yeah, but that's not what we want to. That's not the way we want to be seen. And so that sort of slowly sort of turned. So today, and we still need to keep reminding ourselves and each other about this. But I feel that we have we have a mindset that is, we need to think about this. It's like having I don't know, I can't good examples here, but it's like having knowing that you have a streak of something, be it an addiction or anything, and you keep on having to remind yourself, well, it is an addiction. It's an addiction to the wrong kind of bias, right? That we have in the society. So we need to keep on reminding ourselves, going back to the anonymous innovator meetings, and completely and continuously remind ourselves about not falling into that rut. I think that's really, really important.
But but I think it's a great story, because you did succeed. I mean, you have many more women applying, and you have more people in general, as you say, applying, and that that will and is leading to better ideas coming forward, right? So it's, I think, and with my book, I focus on these sort of good stories of the suitcases and the electric cars and the moon suits and these things, but it's also to create a narrative of why doing the very hard work that you are doing is actually worth it, because if we don't do it, we will miss things like wheels on suitcases and electric.
And we're getting fantastic ideas in. I had a meeting this morning with a female professor researcher who she's like one of the most brilliant minds I've met, and I'm so happy that she decided to come to us and felt comfortable enough to come to us, which that sounds like a weird thing to say, but in a environment, she wouldn't have felt comfortable coming to us in the same kind of way. Just saying, and this goes back to Avanti's question here about the difference between how men pitch when pitch their ideas. When it just came, when she needs to feel comfortable and say, "Look, this is my research. I don't really understand or know how this can be brought to the world, but I think it could be useful." And for us, that's wonderful. Great. Let's start there. Whereas a guy might, have this, this is I'm going to do this and build this, and it's going to fit into this, plug it in there, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's but it's hard work, and I think everyone needs to be. There are no quick fixes, and I think also within the financial system there are no quick fixes. I mean, venture capital gets a lot of criticism, and I think they should be criticized for how few women get funding from there. But they are. I think many of them now are actually trying to find ideas by women, and they can't find them, and there's a pipeline problem, and there's also, which I talk about in the book, and a problem with the fee structure and the incentive structure within venture capital that makes it very difficult for women's ideas to fit into that framework, and then that framework have become so dominant. And there's no quick fix from an economic point of view either, and there's financial innovation required, and but the basics is what you're doing. I think you can do, and I think your story shows that you can do quite a lot with just language. I mean, obviously I'm a writer, so it's not just language, it's very important, but we tend to overlook these sort of small but consistent tweaks and how much you can actually gain from that.
But it's the nudges as well, and it's the nudges of getting people into the right mindset. And this is 2023, going back 20 years in time when we both were like 15 years old or something.
Oh yeah,
oh yeah. Well, I was actually in a huge business development project with one of the Swedish trade unions, and working with it's a whole campaign about working with leadership, right? Because that's my background as well. And we had all of these ads that we thought were really funny, but they were very serious. It was about female male leadership. And today I can look at them 20 years later and go, so what have, and because one was, because it was an economic crisis then, 2003, after the 2001 drop there. And we had one which said, in these times of crisis, you should hire more female managers. They're cheaper.
Oh, that's awful. That's awful. Oh my gosh, that's like, I don't know.
But it was just like, to prove the point that, this is everything is wrong. So I mean, I had a list of those, so I can send them over one day, because it was actually we were quite provocative back then. Anyway, so it's frustrating. However, there are pockets of people and places doing good things. You are one of them. Your book is a fantastic example of it. If you were going to do a revised edition, would you add anything specific, or would you change anything, or what would you sort of update or anything like that?
I think I was very happy when you said that you felt that the book ended on a positive note, because the feedback I've gotten a lot from readers and also from businesses where I've been speaking and conferences is, I read your book, it's really interesting, and it made me so depressed. And that's not what I wanted with the book, because I think I perceived it as a collection of these stories, hopefully weaving a larger picture of basically that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here, right? Innovation is hard, but okay, if we tweak if we realize that we have this gender bias, then maybe we are not going to be as blind to good new ideas as we've been historically, which I show in the book using these examples. So I saw the book as a hopeful story of, look, people, we are innovating with at least one hand sort of tied behind our backs. And if we could just release the hand, or two fingers of the hand, then how much wonderful innovation and growth couldn't we create? That's how I saw it. That is not how most people read the book. Most people, at least the people who sort of come to me with it, with their remarks, read the book as me telling them these stories, and then also showing them how this gender bias was not just a temporary thing, but something that went back 5,000 years in time, to sort of went back to how that we define technology based on sort of a patriarchal idea about what technology is and isn't. Yeah. Why don't we have knitting and sewing and at our museums of technology? Why is sort of everything that women invent, why are we talking about the Bronze Age and the Iron Age and not the Flax Age or the Ceramic Age? Yes, it is because everything that women create, we defined as not being technology. And so the book is full of these things, but I think people read it as, whoa, I can't go back 5,000 years in time and change how we see technology. This is overwhelming. This goes really deep. This goes really, really deep in how I think. This goes really sort of to the core of a lot of things in the financial system. What can I do? And I think, unfortunately, I created some hopelessness. And I didn't want to do that. So I think if I were to go back and revise the book, which I'm not going to do, because I think the great thing with books is that, they're there, they're printed.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's it, Yeah. But I would try to probably tweak that and really make sure that I don't make people depressed with my message, because that's not what I wanted.
I wasn't depressed.
But that's good.
I
You're
wasn't
the exception. You're the exception.
No, I was frustrated, which is my biggest source of innovation for myself.
Okay, that's a good
But
way to look at
I was inspired and wanted to do more and
Yeah.
aim and create and do and fix stuff.
Yeah.
So for me, the book
And
was
you did more. I mean, we worked together. I mean, and I worked with your colleagues, and it was great. Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, I'm look at the time. I mean, it is only a half an hour coffee break. So we're over time, and I just want to thank you again so very, very much for coming back on the show and having another conversation with me. It is an honor for me to welcome you back. And let's see where we are in 3 years, shall we? Who knows?
Let's see where we're at. Thank you so much. It was lovely to speak to you.
Thank you. Take care now. Have a great day. Bye for now.
Bye.